We've been reading them as we've been preparing to come live with y'all. Super exciting. Like I said, let's get started here. Let me share my screen quickly. Oh, hop back. First things first, like I had already said, thank you so much and welcome. Super exciting. Like I said, let's get started here. Let me share my screen quickly. Oh, hop back. First things first, like I had already said, thank you so much and welcome to joining us for a super important conversation that I think we're all passionate about. If you are new here, so new to Paperpal, new to the series, any or all of the above, I highly encourage you after the session, of course, jump on over to Paperpal official YouTube, give us a follow, check it out, and you'll see a ton of other conversations just like this one. And if you follow us, you'll be able to see any of the conversations that we'll have in the future. You'll never miss one. A lot of great stuff there, a lot of great content, and thought leadership about topics like this in general, but also the Paperpal product too. Really good stuff. So, like I said, jump on over to YouTube after the session, of course, give us a follow, and you'll see more of the topics like this. This is one of many conversations that we've had just about AI and education and research and navigating this space that's always changing. Again, go give us a follow, check us out there. I think you'll really enjoy it. The important things, obviously. My name is Rochelle. I am from the Paperpal team. I lead the US marketing team, which is a team of one. So that shouldn't sound too crazy. But I love the space that we're in. I love Paperpal and what we're doing in academics and just the conversations like these that we're having. This is my very first webinar that I'm hosting with Paperpal, and I am so honored to have Chris as my speaker. Chris is straight from the streets of Boulder, Colorado. Currently, I guess we shared growing up streets in Michigan, but currently from the streets of Boulder, Colorado. He is an expert in AI and teaching AI. What I think is so unique about Chris's perspective is that he's currently teaching it. He's in the weeds while AI is changing, and this environment and the space is just constantly evolving, and he's still continuing to teach about it, change his learnings, and sharing those learnings here with us today is, I think, so awesome and so important. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris in a little bit, but before that, I have a couple of housekeeping items. We are on AirMeet. If you've never used AirMeet before, these are just a couple of tips and tricks to make it the best experience possible. First, you have your chat. Let's do the chat first. Your chat window. On your right-hand side, it looks like a couple of speech bubbles. This is a two-way conversation. So be sure to comment, react, share things, all of that. We love seeing it. I know you guys were already getting in there and sharing where you're from, which is awesome. I think we have a registrant from every continent except for Antarctica today, which is amazing. We'll work on Antarctica for next time, but this is a very diverse audience, a wonderful audience from even all different types of backgrounds as well. So be sure to really engage and share, and let's learn from each other here. Also, if you have a question, be sure to then drop to the next tab that you see in the Q&A window. If you put a question in the chat window, we may see it, but if you put it in the Q&A window, our team will definitely grab it, make sure that we see it, and then we'll be able to go through it and answer that at the end. But make sure you do it in the Q&A, not in the chat. Chat may get lost. Q&A will definitely see it. A couple more things. If you see there is a little icon with 4 arrows, go ahead and click that, expand it to full screen. You'll be able to see the chat, the full face, if you will. That might be a little weird, but you'll just get the best experience possible if you watch in full screen. Also, just a reminder, please be mindful, though, of the audio. If you've got people around you, if you're in a public space, either use headphones or better yet, tell them to scooch in and have them join in and be a part of the conversation as well. But if you're in a public space and you're not having a friend join in, make sure to use the headphones to be respectful of those around you. After the session, I think we even had somebody already ask about this too. We will share a recording and the demo recording and the resources that we talk about. So if we're going through, and Chris is going to mention some of the resources in his conversation as well. If you miss it, don't worry. We will send that to you after the conversation as well. So what are we going to chat about? You guys can read what's on the screen. I will summarize it very quickly for us so I can hand it over to Chris. AI is constantly changing. It's here to stay. The conversation is no longer about if, but how we do it really well in academics. So we're getting away from the conversation of just AI detection. How do we make sure we know exactly what's happening, to how do we move to a space where we trust and we're disclosing that we use AI, those sorts of things in the academic space, making sure we're being very transparent and navigating these conversations between faculty, students, all those that are using AI in the academic space. With that, I will now stop sharing my screen, hand it over to Chris. Chris, take it away.
Hey there, everyone. So we are going to start off with actually 2 quick poll questions. So give me 1 sec. I'm throwing my screen up. Hopefully y'all can see that. Fingers crossed. But we're going to take a look and just kind of talk through some of these polling questions first. So first, I'm just curious how confident you are in your approach using Gen AI responsibly. I think that a lot of people, there's a lot of gray areas exactly about what is like responsible use. And so I want to actually just start by doing some level setting there. Where are we with this? 1, I have no idea, and I think this is, I'm just guessing. 5, I feel very, very confident that everything I'm doing is consistent and precise. Nice, yeah. It's fun. It's crazy watching the numbers move so quickly because we have so many people here, right? But yeah, I'm seeing kind of 3 shot out ahead, 4 started to catch up, 3 barely took it out. But this is kind of a pretty standard bell curve, a little heavy towards the ones, right? I think this is a relatively new discussion, right? And there's just a lot of ways that we can help bring a little more clarity here, and that's part of what the goal of this is. So we're going to talk about some expectations there for sure, but also putting a big emphasis on transparency, because I will say, kind of, whether we're talking about in publishing, whether we're talking about in teaching, whether we're talking about in, any other creative endeavor that you're using AI for currently, transparency is increasingly emerging as a best practice. So we're going to talk a lot about that. Nice, loving these results. Can we throw in that second poll question? The second one, scale from 1 to 5, looking at how are you actually practicing transparency in your own Gen AI use? So again, sorry to hit up with just 2 poll questions off the bat, but it helps me kind of get an idea of where everyone in the audience is. Again, seeing these numbers move so crazy. 5 was in the lead, then all of a sudden 4 jumps ahead. Now it's almost an even split with like 4 and 2 ahead. Yeah. Right. I mean, this is a relatively even split. I think the highest one here is 24%. The lowest one was, shoot, the highest one that was 23. Lowest one's 14. Right. I think this is kind of a new, and also I'm seeing people in the chat answering too. Yeah. Right. Pretty even split. So we're going to talk a lot today about that emphasis on transparency and kind of taking a look at how that can be a cornerstone of whatever you're doing. Because if, again, whether you're working on publishing, whether you're in a class, you're working on your dissertation, whatever, every reader you're going to interact with, every stakeholder you're going to interact with might have a different idea of responsible, but transparency is at least a really good best practice to sort of make sure you're meeting everyone where they are. If they think that you're overusing these tools, they at least have the chance to voice that before it has escalated to a huge problem. But we'll talk more about that later. Hopefully, are people having a hard time hearing? I just saw that thing in the chat. Hopefully. Anyway, so let's jump into the presentation here. So thank you so much for taking a minute or two in Poland with me, y'all. But so jumping ahead, I also would like to throw this QR code here and also this link. If any of you are curious about this presentation or any of the resources I'm going to mention, obviously we're setting it out at the end too. But if you're sitting here right now and you just have the chance, feel free to pull it up. Why not? So here's that information, but I'm going to jump ahead now. So I actually want to take a second and talk about who I am, what kind of classrooms I'm in, because I think that all of us probably have different experiences with Gen AI and higher ed, right? If you are in certain types of classrooms, certain types of research environments, that changes how you're seeing it. It also changes what sorts of problems you might be really focusing on. So, hey, I teach classes both in person and online. I also focus on writing courses, which are what I would call a process oriented course rather than a product. What I mean is, I'm trying to teach students how to do a thing. I actually don't care as much about the thing at the end, right? The final paper they make, that artifact is just helpful for me grading them. But what I really care about is the process, right? This might not be true in every field, but in writing, it really is. I also work at a giant major, research one school in America, and that leads to higher costs, which puts additional pressure on students to use these tools in different ways to try to pass at all costs, et cetera, et cetera. Also, my classes, mine personally tend to be small, though I have worked in bigger ones as well. But my writing classes are 15 to 25 students a course, mostly younger, although I do have quite a few, non-traditional adult learners in my class because just the layout of the continuing ed division I'm in, which is great. So I'm just kind of talking about where I'm coming from with this, and then I'm curious to see where you're all coming from. But I just think, again, the classrooms I'm in matter for this conversation. So I want to talk about my own journey kind of running into AI. I'll keep this quick, but I want to talk about how I first encountered AI in my classrooms, how I tried to react, what didn't work, then how I pivoted, what started working, and then we're going to talk about that mosaic approach and how Paperpal really fits into it. So, first, setting the scene. Summer 2023. I'm in New Orleans with my family. We're on this trip. I'm teaching an asynchronous class. It's the only thing I have going on at that point other than the trip. So, I'm so excited. One day, my wife and family are going to do a food tour. I'm going to stay back, do a little bit of work. I'm reading a paper. I have, a stack of 20 papers. I've probably read this stack of paper, done this assignment so many times. I put aside about 3 hours to grade, 4 hours, and it just starts going bad. Right off the bat, I start noticing my students clearly aren't doing the readings, right? They're all pulling the same one or two quotes. They're all also referencing things from outside the readings, but somehow they're referencing the same articles from outside the readings. They're referencing things I've never heard of, which isn't unheard of, but in a quick class, a summer class, these classes are short. It's pretty rare students are doing so much work outside of class. Also, all the submissions were missing basics, right? Wrong page number, wrong number of sources, wrong type of thesis. Maybe they're not integrating all the different parts of the readings. Also, students were skipping scaffold assignments. They weren't doing peer reviews. They weren't doing drafts. They weren't doing annotated bibs. They just were showing up with final papers. So, kind of my spider sense, so to speak, starts tingling. This is interesting. So, what did I do? I panicked, right? I think a lot of us as teachers have been in this position. Oh no, what's happened, right? So immediately, my initial instinct back in 2023 was, I'm banning all of this. I'm on to you students, right? And so I banned all AI use in my class that summer. I told all my students, all of this is obviously cheating. And I also made their decisions about me, right? Why they do this to me. This is a comics class. It's supposed to be fun, right? I also spent some time and I ran every assignment I had through ChatGPT. At that point, it was ChatGPT 3. And this wasn't a bad idea, but it was so time consuming. And also, I really messed up my classroom because I made the whole thing cops and robbers, right? I treated my students like they were criminals trying to get away with stuff, and I was pursuing them diligently. And that's all noble or whatever, but ultimately, it wasn't helping anyone learn. So, what I learned, right? That approach, that full ban approach. I was able to get near like certainty with some of these students and some of the questionable papers, but not always, right? Also, it was unsustainably time consuming. That stack of papers that should have taken me 3 to 4 hours ended up taking me closer to 20, right? I can't do that for every assignment. Also, it totally damaged and like burned my student teacher dynamic. My classroom was never really fun from that point. It made teaching awful. And also, it made it really clear in my meetings with students that these tools, even back in 2023, blurred the lines between what is and is not like responsible, right? My students, many of them thought they were doing totally reasonable things. And actually, when talking with them, I realized many of them were, right? They were maybe leaning a little too hard. Also, some students were really trying and some aren't. And I needed to find a way to nuance that out. A student who is trying to use these tools responsibly and maybe accidentally crossed a line is totally different than a student who's trying to not do the work. And I need to find a way. But ultimately, I found banning didn't work. And why didn't it work? Because look, A, there's already really high student buy-in, right? You can take a look at this DEC survey. This is back from 2024, or this Kadzierski et al. Survey from 2025. The second one is actually from my home institution. They polled 10% of all of our students, around 3,200 students, and just seeing the patterns in their AI use was profound. Secondly, there are legitimate uses of this tool, all like these tools. There are tons of legitimate uses. And I think right when many faculty feel this, that kind of disrupting their classroom, they don't consider that. They just immediately think of it as a cheating tool, get judgmental, but actually there's tons of valid uses. And again, I'd actually really push towards this Bastani et al. Article. This one does a great job showing some like really cool uses these tools, but also shows how even misusing those cool uses can hurt student learning. And then finally, students want to understand. Actually, in every survey I've seen, students have voiced wanting more support. They want guidance on these things. So that to me seemed like an opportunity. We have a thing that, hey, students or people are already doing it, whether they're talking about it or not. Also, can be done better or worse. And also that people want to understand because they're interested in it. That sounded a lot like sex ed or drug education to me, right? That this is a thing people need guidance on. And oftentimes we get weird about how we give that guidance. But at least regularly in the US, it's pretty clear that absence only education regularly doesn't work, right? It kind of stymies that, and that's great. And it feels good, feels like we're in control. But ultimately, it just pushes people towards less safe behavior. And I don't want that. I don't want my students using these tools less safely. So I pivoted. So critical realizations, hey, there's already student buy in, it's already really high. Shoot, that reality exists. I can't do anything about that. I can't change, the acting behavior of 2 billion people, which is, roughly like their weekly users on ChatGPT. Secondly, ethical use is complicated. Great. That's an opportunity for me to start drawing clear lines and also building policy. And students want to understand it. How rare is that my students are asking for more work? But that's great. Time for me to start building some trainings and actually putting AI literacy into my class. So after all that, I came up with a few other realizations. It is really hard being a student right now, across the board, right? The pandemic directly into this kind of Gen AI revolution in terms of the tech, hugely disruptive to the student experience. There are tons of unclear lines. Students have totally inconsistent policies. They might have 4 classes in a day that have 4 different approaches to AI, right? There's a huge skill deficit post COVID. Lots of things people just we didn't know how to teach digitally during the pandemic that students are catching up on now. Also, a lot of burnout I see with my students at every level, the grad students I work with, the postbacks, the postdocs, the researchers, the undergrads in my class. It's just a lot. And then beyond that, costs have went up, while at the same time, people are, because costs are going up, are working more outside of school, which means less time. And then also, the job market has never been less stable because of these very tools that we have to learn how to use. On the whole, it's a really stressful time. And I think that empathy for your students, for your researchers, for whatever any stakeholder you're working with really goes a long way. So I actually did a whole training on this. I encourage you going and watching that video if you're curious. But as I pivoted, it was helpful for me to kind of set out some goals. If I do these things, that will feel like success. So first, I had to bring my time investment down. Like, look, I earnestly love teaching. If I were rich, if PaperPal decided we're going to give Chris $5 million, which I'm open to. Um, Look, I would still teach. I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things, but I can't spend 80 hours a week grading. It's just not tenable. I also had to familiarize myself with these tools. Clearly, my approach to AI didn't work because I didn't understand it, right? I thought it was just one thing and it's really complicated. Beyond that, I really had to get back on the same side as my students, even just for my own sanity or for their sanity or for teaching's sake. This cops and robbers thing. Not that some individual students aren't robbers and I can play the cop in that situation, but approaching my whole class that way has not been helpful. Also, I need to be willing to use the honor code as a last resort, right? The fact is, most of my students, the vast majority, are totally great. But if I'm not actually willing to like use that policy, there's that 1 out of 100 students that is a problem. Also, I had to figure out AI detection. It was clear to me as I was kind of poking around with this that the research was mushy, to say the least. It's cleared up a lot now, but back in 2023, I did not feel great. Also, finally, I had to really encourage ethical use while discouraging what I've come to call lazy use. Using these tools to help augment, grow, and speed up your writing process or whatever, and using it to augment your own thinking and explorations, oh my gosh, that's the best. That's what I want my students doing. But there are lazier uses of these tools. There are uses of these tools that discourage thinking and critical thinking, and they just kind of, yep, that looks good. You move on, you never even read it. And I need to discourage that. And finally, but for my students, I need to clarify those lines. So, how do I do that? I kind of landed at this 6-part approach that I've called the mosaic approach. If I were smarter at marketing, I would have made this an acronym, but I didn't. So let's kind of talk through all 6 of these sides, and then we'll talk about how Paperpal plays a role in some of these. So first, AI literacy assignments, right? This is, I think, is one of the most important things you can do. I don't care who you are. If you are a teacher leading a classroom right now, if you are a student in classrooms, if you are a researcher working on the side with these tools, in any situation, it is really in your best interest right now to start building those AI literacy muscles because it's only going to get more complicated, right? And how, just to give a quick definition, I'm going to say how it works, what its costs are, what its risks and rewards are, and how to use it efficiently. Right? I mean, there's like a ton of different definitions of AI literacy, but just to put like a one sentence definition, that's my best shot. And doing this in your classroom or anywhere is important for everyone. You really want to aim to teach efficiency, but skepticism with these tools because hallucination rates are still quite high and misuse rates they exist. But also you want to aim for depth, right? A lot of my students, the most cynical students of mine who are just at college for the job, they're actually the ones who are the easiest to win over here. Hey, if you just uncritically pass on Gen AI output, all you're doing is automating a future role. That line has gotten a bunch of my students who were very not interested in AI back to the table because it's kind of practically true. If all you're doing is handing off that output, no company is going to pay a salary for that, right? That's a thing they could just build a pipeline to automate. They literally are. That's the kind of what agentic AI does. So again, you need to find a way to use these tools to be better than the tools on their own. But beyond that, your students need guidance, right? And again, there's a wide gap amongst students, especially when it comes to tech literacy and now AI literacy. And this has only gotten worse as the last few years have went on. And it's really hard because AI literacy requires you to have a subject mastery in something so you can kind of test AI on that thing. For me, the first time I had like a real aha moment with AI literacy was asking it to write a bunch of stuff in Latin. I'm a former Latin teacher. And as I was reading over what it translated, I realized every sentence was perfect Latin, but every sentence was a different century of Latin, right? Like no one person would ever have spoken this way because each sentence was from different like centuries, different millennia, different eras. The context matters, and finding something your students know a lot about that you can leverage against it matters. I would encourage you to really think about themselves. Have students have ChatGPT write pieces about them and then reflect on what it wrote. It's a good first start. There's a lot more depth and better things. I actually have a folder here of AI literacy assignments I've made, and actually another separate training I made on just how just to do AI literacy in your classroom. I would encourage either of those as a good starting point. But I do want to say you can only teach what you know. You can only teach AI literacy to the point that you have it. So I'm really going to encourage all of you, whoever you are, go start reading up a little bit. Find some articles you find interesting. Find some interesting, I run an AI reading group. Find something like that. Jump in and just start actually digging into some of the meat here because there is really interesting stuff happening. And once you know it, you can pass it on to your students, to your researchers, to everyone else. But the second thing I started doing was an AI disclosure form. And I would encourage you all to go ahead and take a look at those 2 links here because I wanted to make something that made a way for my students to tell me how they used AI in a paper, but that wasn't obtrusive. If I attached a 10-page, a 10-minute form to fill out, no one's going to fill that out. So I made a quick form that would take about 30 seconds. And, it's nothing crazy. But if you want to take a look, well, take a look at this first one where it says first attempt to open vague. I'm not going to load this right now because I think it would mess up the whole screen share. But the TLDR here is what this one did was it was just asking my students, hey, write me a quick paragraph on how you used AI. This didn't work. This didn't work because students had no idea what was worth mentioning. They didn't also know what using AI meant. If they just asked one quick question to ChatGPT and then did the entire rest on their own, do they have to mention that? Right? They also didn't know what counted as AI. Does Grammarly count? Does whatever. They just didn't know. So my second one, this current version, is one that I have dropped in chat. But here you go. Just to be helpful for people. This second one is a lot quicker. It is a bunch of little check boxes which of these 8 tools did you use? Check the ones you used. And then which of these 15 use cases did you have? Check the ones there. And then a spot to paste some links in so I can review their chats. And that's it. I have tried to make this a deal with my students because I think I am seeing so much right now is students, researchers, young faculty are really nervous about being falsely accused of, over reliance on Gen AI or things like that. A form like this goes a long way towards helping mitigate those fears. If my students fill this out honestly, they will never get in trouble. That is literally like explicitly what I say in my syllabus. And students do. The vast majority of my students are filling out this form now because they want to experiment with these tools and they want to know they're not going to get in trouble. The only thing I say is that if I think you over relied on a tool, I might ask you to go rewrite that a portion or two of your paper. That's it. But me kind of trying to meet my students in the middle, giving them a space to explore these tools safely, while also drawing some lines around what I consider reasonable or responsible, has worked. But, it's not perfect. Two things, you have to put it everywhere, right? In my courses, it is literally in the announcements. I have regular announcements before papers are due, reminding them to do this. I have it on every paper prompt in the course. It is on the syllabus. It is also on its own page with its own video and explanation. So it gets a lot of space and real estate in my course. Also, it's not perfect because students can forget, right? Imagine you're a student turning in your paper 5 minutes before it's due. Really easy just to not fill out that form, right? This happens all the time. So, one thing I also want to give a little credit where it's due, though, here is actually to Paperpal. I think they did a great job sort of working this philosophy into their tool, right? They have a whole AI disclosure thing once you're done with a project that you can just go through, check a few things, have it generate that report for you. I want more AI tools to do this, right? Like I think this is an extremely like valuable thing, right? Built-in transparency like this, whether you are submitting to a journal, you're submitting to a class, you're submitting for a conference. In any of those situations, this sort of built-in transparency is huge. But moving on, I also want to talk about AI detection here because like I said in 2023, the research on AI detection was fuzzy is maybe a good word, right? There were a few articles, Perkins et al., Zhang et al., Liang et al., like a few of these that really highlighted some interesting early patterns. But also, since then, as we've done more testing, things have started to settle. It's pretty clear that there is some amount of ad detection that you can use, especially if what you're looking for is if what you're looking at is 100% AI generated, there's actually quite a few detectors that are great at catching that now. The modern problem is that in 2026, a lot of students are using, or a lot of people are using these tools in complicated ways. They'll use it to brainstorm, then they'll write a little bit, then they'll go have it edit, then they'll write a little bit more. They'll have it give them some ideas for next paragraph, then they'll write more. Then they'll go back and get notes on the whole first half of the paper, then they'll keep writing, right? Most people aren't just using AI once in a project, they're using it at multiple stages. And AI detection, I think, is really struggling with that. Some modern detectors are claiming to be great at it, but either way, I don't need them to be perfect at it. If all I'm trying to do is discourage the laziest use, having AI detection lets me do that, right? And it is pretty clear in the literature it's good at that. Also, what's really nice is this is the way that's allowed me to focus my vision and save some time. If I have 20 papers and I put 18 of them through, I put all 20 through and 18 come back, under 5% AI or under 20% or wherever I set the threshold, that's great. That allows me to then focus my eyes on the two that are actually at question. Then I can take their AI detection report, put it up next to the disclosure form that the student filled out, and actually see, how did they do this? If those two things match up, they're good, right? Part of the point of me having or any like place having an AI disclosure and transparency policy means that they're allowing some amount of that use, right? So suddenly just having an AI detection score is not a big deal. It's about having an AI detection score that matches your disclosure. But obviously, there's some problems here. At least in the U.S., there's real concerns around FERPA and like federal protections and privacy for educational records. And we don't know if AI detection plays a role in that. We're still waiting for the courts to decide. So, to that end, this is just one more part of that mosaic approach. But jumping ahead, again, I wanted to give a little bit of credit to PaperPal. They have built-in AI detection in their product. So while you are writing, you can kind of write through this, go back through, have it scan the things you wrote. How does it break that down? Again, really helpful. If you're using PaperPal and you're just thinking about, I'm working on this academic project, this gives you some insight into how other stakeholders might review your project. That's super valuable. Again, the kind of feature I wanted more tools. Third thing I really started relying on a lot was process tracking. Google Docs, Office 365, all of these modern Office applications that are online, they keep change logs, right? Like you can go into any Google Doc, Google Slide, whatever. You could take this presentation if you had edit access and you could go through and look at every change I ever made to it. And that's really powerful in the era of AI because if my students are telling me I wrote this part manually, but I used ChatGPT here just to help with this part, I should see a bunch of manual writing and then a large copy paste, maybe an edit, a large copy paste, and then moving on. Right. And so process tracking allows me to really actually look at the AI detection reform or AI detection and AI disclosure and kind of corroborate them. It is worth saying that during the pandemic, a bunch of tools came out that allow people to to manipulate these logs, right? I mean, I'm not going to start name dropping bad tools, but they exist. It is not hard to do. But also, I'll say right now, if I'm working with a student and I see any of those extensions like on their Chrome, I immediately know why they're there, right? But by all means, that is still a big red flag. It's also worth saying that these process tracking, like there's tons of reasons there will be glitches. Just to give an example, I had a student who I was convinced copy pasted their whole paper, and it ends up instead what happened is they had sat down on an airplane without Wi-Fi, wrote the whole paper, and then as soon as they connected to Wi-Fi, it all popped up at once. Right. So on my end, on the process change log, it looked like one giant copy paste. The reality was quite different. So again, this is a cool piece of evidence. Whether you are a faculty member trying to build a policy in your classroom, or you're like a researcher trying to figure out how you can make your work transparent and like the obvious in terms of where it came from. Either way, this is a really valid part, but it's on its own not bulletproof because of some of those tools. So again, credit where it's due for Paperpal. They don't have a full process tracking suite, but they do have something that at least tracks your AI use. It specifically tracks like when you're turning on, off, when you're taking AI inclusions, blah, blah, blah. That's still really valuable and a great first step in that direction. So again, just small props to Paperpal. I wouldn't have been here doing this talk for them if I didn't think their product actually hit multiple parts of what I was hoping for, which I love. So finally, though, I have some evidence now, right? I have an AI disclosure form that a student has filled out. I have the detection report from their paper. I also know they know my policy because we've met and discussed a bunch of this. And now I have some process tracking. So I have all this evidence about the provenance of their paper. So finally, now my favorite part, awkward conversations. Nothing's more fun than having to bicker with students, but no, I'm kidding. But yeah, I mean, this is a thing where I don't care who you are as a stakeholder, we have to normalize being open to talking about these things. It's not insulting to ask someone what was the role of AI in writing this piece because 80% of people are using Gen AI to help them with work at this point, at least in the higher ed surveys I'm seeing. So by all means, if the student didn't use AI, that's a really easy AI detection, like AI disclosure form to fill out, right? But having these conversations with your stakeholders goes a long way. If you're submitting to a journal, just saying, "Here's how I use these tools. Is that appropriate?" They can say yes or no. If they say no, then you edit according to whatever they consider appropriate there. Right. My experience though too is most people aren't experienced liars and also most people don't want to be lying. Right? If you can just create a path of least resistance that is honesty, people will usually take that. So if I'm just meeting students where they are, "Hey, I noticed in your paper these things seemed really synthetic and AI generated, whereas these parts didn't. Here's what I saw in your report. I'm not mad. I just want to know what happened here. Maybe we need to rewrite this." Lots of my students are going to say yes to that. Also, for what it's worth, if you're a teacher, kind of talking to the teachers in the room here, if you're a teacher and you're having this sort of approach to their students, this is an opportunity to model empathy and also like presence, right? There are absolutely conversations you can have with a student about their use of these tools that are good for the student and show you care. Also, you can bring evidence in from those previous factors. Hey, I know you said you didn't use AI here, but you got a 99.8% on this AI detection score, and your entire document history is just one copy paste. What happened? Right. And then finally, hey, this is imperfect because people can lie, they can misremember, stuff can happen. In that case, I'm also going to tell you right now, you should give second chances, right? All of this stuff is still being figured out right now. And by all means, if you catch one student and you think for sure they cheated, but they insist they did not, give them that second chance because what's probably going to happen is one of these next things. Either that student was being honest and you're just helping them find the line, right? They're now figuring out the line of responsibility together. Or that student lied and got away with it, but they know they got caught and should, statistically speaking, change their behavior. Tons of research shows that, even these sort of warning shots with students who are maybe crossing a line leads to remediations in behavior. But also, if the student lied on the first one and you continue to see that flag on the second paper, that's a huge tell in its own right, right? You can start kind of making that argument this is in bad faith. And also, I know these detectors make mistakes. They don't make mistakes longitudinally and frequently like this. Also, finally, if again they know they've been caught, generally that's going to reduce cheating across the board in your classroom, even if you don't report that student. So again, this allows you to act with more certainty. Just that one flexibility rule of like every student gets one second chance. This allows you to act with that much more certainty, encouraging students exploring new tool, and they're going to be clumsy about it, while also holding bad faith students accountable. That's where I started trying to find nuance there. So I've got many solutions that tell a part of the story. Where does that leave me? This mosaic approach. So where I'm at now, the pros, hey, the vast majority of my students are playing along. The vast majority, over 80% of my students at this point, are turning in reports. Depends on the class. And my upper level classes tends to be closer to 90%. Also, more students are corrected with fewer of them getting honor coded. I can't tell you how many meetings I have right now where me and a student sit, go through their paper, and talk about how maybe they did over rely on some tools. Then they just ask for another day or two while they do a bunch of editing. And then we come back to the table. They have corrected their paper to my standards. They don't get honor coded, they get a better grade. Everyone's happy, right? I am hitting my learning objectives, they're learning. What a world. Also, I'm putting in less time. It's still more time than I was putting in 2017 per assignment, but it's less time than I was putting in 2023. Also, I'm back to teaching the writing process, and a lot of the feedback now involves how they're using these tools. I could only do that because I'm confident and I use these tools myself, which is part of what I was saying all the way at the beginning. You need to, if you're like approaching an AI literacy approach in your classroom, you kind of need to get comfortable with these tools yourself. And finally, teaching is fun again. I'm having a good time. My students and I are having a lot of fun with like AI literacy assignments, making fun of these tools, laughing at awkward moments where maybe they copy pasted too much and how it hurt and then we're editing, right? Teaching is a good time again. Where I'm at cons, there's still uncertainty, right? I still have the occasional student where I'm fairly confident they misuse some tools, but the evidence just doesn't quite hit that threshold. Or it still takes substantial time, right? There are the occasional assignments that just blow up still. I'm also not convinced how scalable this entire thing is, right? This works for my classes where I'm teaching smaller classes and often with some level of in person meetings. In a fully async class or in a more degree oriented setting, or I don't know, with less AI confident faculty, I don't quite know how this exact approach would work, admittedly. Also, part of this means I have to keep up with the tech, which is fine because I'm also an instructional designer. I get to hang out and read a bunch of AI research every week. That's great, but that might not be as easy for everyone. Also, new tools are coming out every day, and it's making things easier and harder. Some of the tools, like Paperpal, I think have built-in suites of features that really help kind of with that transparency. They promote that honesty and that disclosure, but there's tons of tools that don't, and I need to know those too, and my students are using those as well. And then finally, I need to keep updating my assessments basically every semester, making them more authentic, making them more engaging, whatever. I've dropped another link here to a training I did on that. Basically, what does assessment redesign look like in the era of AI? Feel free to take a gander. So, what's next? Well, first, continued development of AI literacy assignments in every level, but especially in my first year course. I personally started to realize that what first year students need is really different than later in their career students need for AI literacy. I also need more in class modeling. Right now, there's a lot of times where I'll like pull up ChatGPT or Claude or one of those in class, and we'll do a little bit of experimentation together. I need to do more of that and probably with more tools. I also need to keep exploring new tools, PaperPal being one of them. I also need to research kind of differentiating these more by course type. Right. Again, my upper level versus my first year classes probably need more differentiation there. And that's pretty clear to me now. So here's a bunch of resources. I dropped a bunch of these in the chat, but also they're linked everywhere. Please go take a look at any of these. I think a bunch of these should be interesting or fun. I really want to draw your eyes to this last note, though, at the bottom. I would really encourage you to join some sort of professional communities on this, right? Hearing about this through Paper Pals Network, heck yeah, join that community, meet other experts in the field, right? I also want to plug the teaching and learning with was it the teaching and learning and higher ed with AI community. It's a Google group on there. Really big fan of them as well. Advertise this there. They're the best, right? But whoever you are, there is a community of people like you trying to figure this out. I really encourage you to work with that community. But anyway, feel free to reach out to me as well. Right? Here's my LinkedIn. Here's my email. Here's my Blue Sky. Drop me a line. I'm always glad to kind of chat, bounce ideas around, and see how I can help. But anyway, that's sort of where I'm on this. I'm gonna stop my share now so we can hand it back shall.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to pop back over to there we go. Perfect. Chris mentioned a lot of different things, a lot of different tools. If you're interested in, before we are going to get to questions, so don't think we won't get into that. But while we have your attention with some of the Paperpal Prime tools that we've mentioned, there is a code here to get 30% off. Take note of this. Again, this is going to be in the resources that are shared out after the fact. So know that. Take a screenshot. Make sure that you get that so you can test out some of these things if you haven't had a chance to do that already. All right, let's jump into the Q&A. First of all, thank you so much for those that have thrown in questions to the question tab. We're going to go through some of them here. Some of them are from more of a Paperpal approach. Chris, some of them are specifically for you. So be ready.
Yeah.
We've got some really good questions for you.
I'm also jumping through the Q&A, just answering
Yeah.
random questions too. But go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
awesome. So what we'll do, we'll go through, we'll say it out loud. So in just case anybody hasn't found the Q&A tab yet, they can be exposed and hear the answer in the conversation too. And we'll go through it there. First, which I think this is a really great question from just AI in general, but can I use AI to edit language in a research paper? Is this allowed? And must I declare this in the paper? Chris, I would love for you to share your thoughts on it
Yeah,
from your
this is one
Paperpal.
of the ones I was just typing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my experience, first of all, I mean, look, the annoying answers is going to depend on the publisher, the stakeholder, the journal you're submitting to. Every journal has slightly different rules right now. Hopefully in the future that won't be the case, but right now there are just huge differences. But my experience is most will allow you to use Gen AI tools for like editing, grammar, and language as long as you disclose it, right? And again, I would maybe review their policy, but this is a great example of just when it's valuable to say like, hey, I wrote the whole thing this way, I used AI this way. Is that cool? Right? I would say lead with honesty and see what the journal says, but most of them would be pretty cool with it, in my experience, as long as
Yeah,
it's disclosed.
I agree. And that's the key. Disclosure is the huge piece to that. For some context too, from the Paperpal side of things, we see English as a second language users use it for language help and language assistance all the time. So again, check with your institution, with your professor, whatever that may be. Make sure that you're following their guidelines and have that disclosure as a part of it. But from a general approach, we see it done all the time. And AI can be a really helpful tool for that as well. Excellent. Next question. AI currently used by students during exams. Is there a way to identify solutions generated from AI from your perspective, Chris?
It depends exactly on the exam structure, and I should say this, it depends on the content as well. If we're talking about a math class versus a coding class versus a writing class, really different there too. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the big problems facing higher ed currently, right? Is how do we secure these assessments, especially not just with AI, but also in the era of smart wearables. It's actually those two things together that make this really hard, right? I mean, I don't know if people heard, but I believe it was Princeton that just went to proctoring all their exams for the first time in 180 years, right? Like we are seeing schools change the way they approach this. So if you're asking about just from the content itself, if it were an essay, I think yeah, there are ways to still catch that. But if we're talking math and coding, it's a lot harder actually. But there are still contextual ways to catch it. So for example, I know some schools have started looking at time to complete a question, right? I have heard some schools doing this. Where like, yeah, we did a computer science exam. Any student who answered this question in under 8 seconds, we absolutely flagged, or whatever. So things like that are still happening. But you're totally right. The assessment security question is a huge $1 billion question right now.
Yeah. Yeah. This is totally anecdotal, but I did have a conversation with a professor just recently, and we were talking about this same thing, just AI use in general, and those that aren't disclosing usage, and trying to figure out what the solution is there. And he had mentioned even going to graded assignments, so whether it be exams or even homework assignments too, that are done via conversation. And it's really hard to fake a conversation in that point too. So I know that's the total extreme, and it probably won't work for a lot of the courses that some are doing and hosting. But there's another option too.
Yeah,
Good old comms.
I would bet that down the road, like if we were to have this conversation again in like 3 years, I think a lot of schools are like already bringing back oral assessments. Not even necessarily blue books because those are still pretty cheatable with like smart wearables. The big
Yeah.
question I keep seeing is like, yeah, one-on-one like oral assessments. I meet with my professor for 15 minutes and show what I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to hop into the next question. This one is really interesting. I'll kind of take it from the paper pal perspective. Chris, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too, just from like tools in general and AI detection tools in general. But this person is stating, I used to use PaperPal to improve my academic writing for research papers, but I noticed my paper then gets a high AI score on Turnitin. That's a huge problem, of course. I'm now hesitant to use PaperPal. I'd also flag like all AI writing tools. Does anyone else have this issue? You can always jump. Anyone else that's in the conversation can always jump over to the Q&A tab. Um, from a PaperPal perspective, it's always best, obviously, to start with your full, complete thought and have the tool help you kind of guide it through either grammar corrections and all of those things. In that same question, actually, this person who asked the question has said, well, even in Turnitin, I've had fully human written projects be then flagged as AI as well. So it's an ever evolving target from a AI detection perspective. Obviously, AI algorithms are changing, the detection software is changing, like all of the things are changing kind of in tandem. It can be a moving target from a detection perspective. How do you navigate that, Chris, from a teaching perspective using tools like Turnitin as these detection softwares, and sometimes when we get false flags, or we're just using it from a grammar perspective and it's getting flagged as the whole paper has a high score, like how do you navigate that and how do you kind of put your lens on there?
Yeah. I mean, the issues around Turnitin and AI detection are part of why I started going to this mosaic approach sort of
Yeah,
style anyway, right? Because like, don't get me wrong, I think, like I was saying in the AI detection part, there is a place for AI detection. It is specifically very, very, very good at catching 100% or near 100% AI written pieces, right? And that's really the only, I'm essentially litmus testing my students to say, is this entirely AI? If it is, there is no acceptable submission in my class that is 100% AI, right? So if that comes up, hey, that's a thing I will talk about that student. But for anything less, right? If I get a paper that says it's 80%, I'm not assuming the worst of the student. I'm trying to meet with the student. And I think that that's one of the problems that I'm seeing with a lot of current AI detection is not necessarily the technology underneath, which I think is improving pretty quickly, right? I don't want to start name dropping other companies. I feel like that would be a weird thing to do. But there are other companies that I think are doing substantially better work than Turnitin with AI detection right now. But I think the actual problem is the training around these tools. Faculty should not be expecting ad detection to be a silver bullet. It's not going to be magic, right?
mhm,
It's going to be good. It's going to be useful. It's going to be mostly reliable for catching really heavily reliant on AI pieces. But if I have a student who's doing kind of what you're describing here, someone who is writing a bunch with their own ideas, using AI to help expand them, rewriting a bunch of their own, then using PaperPal to help polish, that is pretty complicated, and I don't want that coming back 100% AI written. And my hunch is this is a problem with the training of faculty as well. That a lot of faculty are just really overwhelmed right now, and they're
sure.
looking for easy solutions because they're feeling overwhelmed and under supported. And like some of this is a thing that needs fixed at the system level and not just any one tool, which is a bit of a bummer, but the reality.
Sure, sure. And would you say that this is like the prime example of why faculty and students should really lean into those disclosure statements?
Yeah,
Because it can be like, hey, yes, it was a tool, but this is exactly how I used it. And I'm being as transparent as possible to do it in this
100%. I
process. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think that what I keep hearing from faculty and kind of where I'm at with this as well is I'm not mad at students who are working with me in good
Right.
faith. If a student, text me, doesn't don't text me if you're a student. If a student emails me and says, "Hey, I wrote this paper. I used AI in these ways. I'm a little worried that might have been too much. Let me know if it is." I'm
Mhm.
never going to assume that student is acting in bad faith. I think that student is just figuring out the lines with me. And that's like I think I want more of that. That disclosure, that transparency, at the very least, even if you do accidentally cross the line of what your faculty member or publisher wants, you're at least showing you're like trying to act in good faith and they can just negotiate down to, oh, okay, this is what you want. Yeah, let me rewrite this portion. We're all good. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's what I want is that transparency. It shows me the student is engaged.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump to this question. We have I'm just jumping around here because I feel like it's very relevant to this topic that we're on right now. Kind of to the flip side, if a student does not use AI to write a paper, are they now seen as a poorer student, or do they have a poor grade because of that?
No, not in my classes. I think I mean, I do have classes I've taught where literally one of the learning objectives is like AI literacy. And so in
Mhm.
that class, I do want my students at least practicing with the tools a little bit for that like module. But realistically, like let's just say a traditional writing class, I want every student to be comfortable using whatever tools they use.
Yeah,
Right. I don't tell students whether they use Pages versus Word, and it seems like it'd be crazy for me to tell them which LLMs to use, if any. Right? That is totally their own choice as a student. I do
sure,
not think of a student as less for that.
sure, absolutely. Um, kind of on the same lines. We, as editors, look for AI and use plagiarism tools to flag AI written text. New to writing, writing students don't write themselves. They use AI as a writing slave. But still, journals don't allow AI text, right? Or how can someone get past this? And I
Yeah,
think that, yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say, like, I think that is part of the problem. And like what I hear in part of that question is actually a thing that universities are like really, really struggling with is that different students use these tools. Maybe we'll say they navigate the ethics of these tools in very different ways. I totally get it. You're right. A brand new writer probably is going to overly rely on these tools. And that's where you need like really clear lines and enforcement of those lines. Whereas in my upper level classes and with like more experienced writers, ELL or not, what I'm seeing is more that they're trying to figure out how to use these tools for efficiency, but also not get in the way of authenticity. I think that what I just heard in that question is also part of like the maturing of a student, right? A
Right.
young student versus a more experienced one who has an idea where they're trying to go with those things. And so 100% I think that is part of the problem. And you are to that question asker, you are totally correct. That is one of the like big problems that's making this harder. If every use of Gen AI was cheating, it would be the easiest thing in the world to like enforce. Or vice versa. If every use was like totally benign and productive, that'd be great too. The problem is it can do both, and kind of putting policy around a tool that can do both is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And the by the way, audience, these are awesome questions. I feel like they're all tying into the same theme. So this is a really great conversation. Thank you so much for engaging and asking these questions.
Yeah,
We'll
I'm
try to
loving
get,
this.
yeah, we'll try to get to all of them. I promise. I promise. Um, the next, again, on the same theme, would you argue that AI plagiarism is an evolving game of cat and mouse? The industry is always evolving, thus the tools to mitigate AI detection do too. What are your thoughts there, Chris?
Yeah, I mean it is. It is absolutely like an arms race, cat and mouse sort of thing. But also, I think what I want to make sure what bothers me sometimes is I often get to these conversations with especially with administrators, frankly, where they forget that cat and mouse means both sides are also making progress. If you're someone who's looking at AI detection and you're citing like the Liang et al piece from 2023 or the Perkins et al piece from 2023, and you're kind of using that as proof that AI detection is pointless, you're also not giving them credit that that side also catches up. Right? Like the fact is, like, yes, AI detection has gotten substantially better in the last 3 years. And like to the point that there are multiple apps that are like partnering with like newspapers and things like that. But you're totally right. What I would call obfuscation tools or tools to help you kind of get around these ethics are also improving. But that was the case before AI, right? Before AI, at least in higher ed, there are websites like unemployed PhDs where you can just pay people to write your papers, right? Like there's always been holes in the ship. There've always been ethical opportunities for people with bad ethics, we'll say.
Sure.
Um,
Yep.
I think it's important to not go crazy trying to have the perfect. We never had the perfect. It's all about just finding ways to do this as efficiently and effectively and consistently as possible. And I think again, transparency is that huge part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I feel it just the I love how everything is so on topic and just kind of reiterates again the transparency, being authentic in the approach. All of these things are so critically important on all stages of the platform, right? Whether you're
Yep.
the student that's submitting or the faculty member that's trying to find the balance here, it's just all about coming to the table with authenticity and transparency.
And I think that that transparency brings different values in different stages of your work too. So, for example, let's say like I was working with a younger scholar at CU recently who is using Gen AI tools to help generate specifically the visual elements for a paper they were
Mhm.
going to submit, and I think that was a totally reasonable like 100% good use of those tools. But also them being transparent about their AI use in that way is how they caught later when one of those graphs actually had the proportions off. Right,
Mm,
like literally, it was just something where like the scale on the x-axis was wrong, and us knowing this was a Gen AI generated graph kind of made it something that we check first, right? Like, okay, maybe this just kind of messed up like it hallucinated when generating this image. Okay, yep, that's exactly what it was. Done. In a world where we did not know that that was AI generated, we probably would have checked a bunch of other stuff first,
sure.
right? Being transparent about that AI use, whether it's for publication or in a classroom setting, just gives people the opportunity to kind of react accordingly and sort of actually know what to do with that piece.
Right, absolutely. Um, this next question, AI appropriates original work when you revise with it. How do we handle this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that is a question that is more for the courts than for me individually, to
Sure.
be frank. Right? Like the way that it, because to be fair, the way that it uses previous work is it's in that giant churn of training material. Right? It's not going to pull out individual quotes, but the person is totally right. It can pull ideas from that. I would argue on some very basic level that's true for how humans work as well. Right? Like when I'm writing a research paper, I'm influenced by all the papers I have read on that topic too. Right? So there is part of that, but also, you're right that I do think there actually are probably ethical and legal concerns at play there, but that's all stuff above my head. That is stuff at the journal level or at the legal level.
Yeah. And then kind of on the same platform, what level of AI detection is acceptable in a research thesis?
That's a great question. I mean, again, this is part of why transparency matters because to me personally, the answer to that question depends on exactly that transparency. Because if, for example, let's say you're someone who is writing a research piece that you used AI to help you outline, then you wrote a bunch of the paragraphs, and you had AI help you go through and grammar check the whole thing. Then at the end, you had AI give you notes for revision that you took to make the whole piece just a little more brief. Hey, that's going to have a pretty high AI detection score. But as long as you told me those are things you're doing, I'm going to expect a high AI detection score. If you tell me that all you did was use it for outlining and then you insist that you wrote the rest of it on your own, I'm going to expect that score to be pretty low. Right. And this is part of the reality is that transparency kind of allows me as a stakeholder to set in my head where I imagine that number would be. But I will say, like, for a research piece, I would expect the majority of the ideas in there to be yours. And the
Mm,
majority of the words, the ideas, and all that. And at the end of the day, if it comes back 80%, and that's just because you had ChatGPT put a lack of grammar on there, that's
mhm,
okay. Right. As long as I can go through and be like, look at like the rough drafts and see that this is obviously yours.
absolutely. One last note, well, 2 last notes. There was a question in, the thread about having a very, very large class. How do you
Mhm.
use
Yep.
Paperpal? All of the things. Chris, I would love your perspective on it. From the paper pal perspective, I will say we will connect with you actually and share some really great resources. This could probably be a whole nother session. As a matter of fact, I think we do have a recorded session on our YouTube about this in particular. I don't want to, we only have a couple minutes left. I don't want to take away time, but we will follow up with you specifically from the paper pal side of things and how to navigate that. Chris, I don't know if you want to add any thoughts there too on just using AI in very large instances and guiding people through the do's and don'ts, and maybe a couple of quick tips and tricks on how you navigate that in a like maybe early stage learn the younger students that are learning how to work through this.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, this is literally one of my jobs this summer with CUs. I'm helping develop like a crash course training seminar for CU students on AI literacy, right? Like on some very real level, I this is going to sound optimistic, but I think this is the hardest that 1400 person class will ever be to teach because I
Yeah.
think that like 3 or 4 years from now, we will have students who are entering the university with more of an understanding of AI literacy. There will be clearer policies and maybe hopefully fingers crossed, more tools that are trusted and people know how to build kind of policy around, right? Right now, we don't have any of that really. And I think that's where so much of the problem around that 1400 person class is. My heart goes out to you because, like, I don't right now. Yeah. I mean, I think if I were in your shoes, I would be trying to find any tools I personally could trust that I could use to make my class sane, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. From the paper pal side of things, I think we have some really great solutions that make things very easy and that feature a lot of the things that Chris was talking about in his discussion today, like the AI detection, like all of the pieces, the different like disclosures in that as well. again, we will reach out and send you those and even schedule some time with you one-on-one if that's an opportunity for you to see what we can do to help you along on the PayPal process itself. That we are at time. So I want to be sure that we dot all of our I's and cross all of our T's. But if you loved this session or you would like to see more, please fill out the feedback form. Shared it in the chat. Please share your thoughts. It's the only way we get better. It's the only way we find new topics to discuss and what really matters for the industry. So please be sure to do that. It would be incredibly helpful for us. We'd love you a ton if you could do that for us. But also, please join our Discord, join the conversation. Go ahead and scan it. It'll bring up our chat. I think we also had it linked in the chat too. So if you've already done that, awesome. But please join the conversation. This is what we live and breathe. We want to be sure that AI has its place in academics and it's done the responsible and ethical way as well. Join the conversation, please, 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 please. And last but not least, thank you all so much. Thank you, Chris. This was amazing.
Thanks for having me, Rochelle, and thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a great conversation, great questions. Appreciate you all. Go to our YouTube and follow us so you don't miss another one. And we'll see you guys next time.
Nice meeting everyone. Take care, everyone. Have a great
Bye,
day.
y'all. Thank you.